What kind of bakery runs out of croissants at 7 a.m.? Xavier Owens leaned over his office desk, rereading the complaint printed out by his assistant. It wasn't the first customer to say something, but this one hit different. A woman had driven 20 minutes to the third location of his 8-store bakery chain, just to be told they were already out of half their morning pastries. No apology, no alternative offered. She'd walked out, frustrated, and apparently not for the first time. Xavier rubbed the back of his neck. He bought the struggling bakery chain 6 years ago, poured his savings into it, and built it up piece by piece. The brand had grown, but lately, something felt off. Sales were decent, but customer complaints were rising. Staff turnover was high in 2 locations. Numbers on paper didn't tell the full story. He needed to see it for himself. So he picked one of the locations he rarely visited, store number 5, tucked between a strip mall and a gas station on the east side of town. He'd never met the staff there. Turnover had been high, and the last manager had quit 4 months ago. The new manager, Casey, had only been there a few weeks. Perfect. No one there would recognize him. 2 days later, Xavier showed up at 5 a.m., wearing worn jeans, steel toe boots, and a faded hoodie. He even added a scruffy beard and thick-rimmed glasses. He introduced himself as Chris from the temp agency. Said he was sent over for the week to help cover shifts while they trained new hires. Casey barely looked up from her phone when he stepped into the break room. "Yeah, we're short-handed," she muttered, tossing him an apron. "You'll be stocking the front display. If customers ask anything, point them to me or Danny. Don't get clever." Xavier gave a polite nod and walked to the front, where the glass display case stood mostly empty. One lonely cinnamon roll sat near the corner. He frowned. It was peak morning rush hour. Where were the muffins, the scones, the croissants? He headed into the back to grab trays from the prep room. That's when he noticed something odd. A skinny guy in a stained apron, mid-30s, dark blonde hair, pale face, was rushing through the back hallway, arms full of flour bags and a carton of eggs. He wasn't heading toward the ovens. He was going out the back door. Xavier watched from behind a rack of cookie sheets, frozen. The man kicked the door open with his foot, looked around quickly, and disappeared behind the dumpster. A moment later, he returned empty-handed. Xavier stepped back into the kitchen before he was seen. He didn't say anything. Not yet. Instead, he went back to the front and started filling the case with what few pastries he could find. Most trays in the walk-in were half empty. Some ingredients were missing altogether. His hands worked automatically as his mind raced. He wasn't ready to jump to conclusions. Maybe it was a mistake, maybe the guy had permission, but something felt off. And if someone was stealing supplies, it could explain a lot. At noon, he sat with Danny, a quiet, sharp-eyed girl, maybe 23, who'd been icing cupcakes by the sink. "You been here long?" he asked casually. 4 months, she replied, barely glancing up. "You like it?" She hesitated. "I like baking." That said a lot. "Hey," Xavier lowered his voice, "who's the guy with the blonde hair, the one hauling stuff out back?" Danny looked around quickly, then leaned closer. "That's Troy. He's one of the bakers, been here a while, kinda, does his own thing." Xavier kept his tone light. "Is it normal for him to take stuff out the back?" Danny stiffened. "You didn't hear it from me, okay? But yeah, happens a lot. Flour, eggs, butter, sometimes full trays of dough." "I don't know where it goes. Does Casey know?" She says it's none of our business. Xavier stared at the counter. That explained the missing inventory, the half-stocked cases, the rising costs. But what bothered him more was the silence. No one had reported it. No one felt safe enough to. That night he stayed late to mop. Casey left early, saying she had appointments. Danny offered to stay, but he waved her off. Once the store was empty, Xavier slipped outside and circled to the back corner. There it was. A small metal shed behind the dumpster. Locked. But flour dust trailed out from underneath. He snapped a photo of the trail with his phone. He didn't want to believe it, but it was starting to add up. The next morning, he arrived early again. This time, he waited in the break room until Troy showed up. The baker barely acknowledged him. "Morning," Xavier said casually. Troy grunted. You're still here, just for the week, Xavier replied, smiling, trying to learn the ropes. Troy shrugged and headed into the kitchen. Xavier followed him in, then slipped out to fill the display. At 7:10 a.m., just as the first wave of customers entered, he spotted Troy again, arms full, heading for the back door. Xavier's heart pounded. He dropped the tray of scones and followed. This time he didn't hide. "Troy," he called, stepping into the hallway. Troy froze. "What are you doing?" Xavier asked, voice firm. Troy's arms tightened around the supplies. "Nothing, just moving stuff." Out the back, Troy's jaw clenched. "You new guys ask too many questions." Xavier stared him down. "Put it back." "Or what?" Xavier's voice dropped. "Or you'll find out." They stared at each other for a long second. Eventually, Troy turned, muttering under his breath, and shoved the supplies back onto the shelf. Xavier walked away. His hands were shaking. He wasn't just dealing with theft. He was dealing with a culture of fear and silence. And it was time to end that. The next morning, Xavier arrived before sunrise. The parking lot was empty aside from Danny's beat-up hatchback. Inside, she was already mixing batter with earbuds in and didn't notice him right away. He nodded to her and headed to the front to unlock the doors. 15 minutes later, Troy walked in, dragging his feet and yawning. He didn't acknowledge Xavier. Casey arrived at 6:30, coffee in hand, sunglasses still on, and vanished into the office without a word. She didn't ask about the stock, the display, or the open register drawer left from the night before. Xavier noted it silently. By 7:15, the first customers trickled in. A young woman with a stroller peered into the case, visibly disappointed. "No blueberry muffins today?" she asked. Xavier shook his head. "Afraid not. We're a bit short on a few things," she sighed. "It's always something with this place." He apologized sincerely, but she was already walking out. Two others followed her lead, and Xavier felt the knot in his stomach tighten. When the rush slowed, he went into the kitchen. Danny was icing cookies again, her hands moving quickly, face tired but focused. "Do we ever get supply deliveries midweek?" Xavier asked, keeping his tone casual. She kept working. "Fridays only." "So what happens if we run out before then?" She hesitated. "We're just told to make it work." Xavier leaned against the counter, watching the frosting swirl. "Anyone ever talked to Casey about it?" Her response was quiet. "She says if we need more, we should have planned better." Before he could reply, a loud metal clang came from the prep area. Troy was at the sink, slamming mixing bowls down, clearly irritated. "I swear," Troy muttered. "How are we out of sugar already?" Xavier walked over. "Need help finding something?" Troy shot him a glare. "Yeah, find the idiot who forgot to order more. You're the one who preps, right?" Troy dropped the spoon into the sink with a wet splash. "What's that supposed to mean?" Xavier kept his voice even. "Just asking how we ran out." "That way we can fix it." "I've been here longer than anyone," Troy snapped. "Don't start pointing fingers. I'm not," Xavier said calmly. "I'm just trying to understand what's going on." Troy turned away, muttering under his breath again. Danny didn't look up, but the tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Later that morning, Casey finally emerged from the office. She wandered behind the counter, poked at a few labels, then pulled Xavier aside. "Hey, Chris, right?" He nodded. "You don't need to be talking to Troy about inventory. That's not your role." "I was just trying to help," he said. "Well, don't," she replied bluntly. "He's sensitive about stuff. Let him do his job." Xavier studied her face. Her tone wasn't protective, it was dismissive. Like she couldn't be bothered. "Understood," he said flatly. She walked away without another word. That night he stayed behind again. Danny was already cleaning the cake pans when he walked back into the kitchen. "You okay staying a bit longer?" he asked. She shrugged. "I guess." He grabbed a rag and started wiping the prep counters beside her. After a moment he asked, "You ever think about quitting?" She paused. "All the time." "What keeps you here?" She took her time answering. "Rent. And I like the baking part when I actually get to do it." "You don't always." "I get pulled to the register a lot, or stuck cleaning because Casey says it's teamwork, but Troy never cleans. He just yells if something's missing." Xavier nodded slowly. That doesn't sound fair. It's not, she said, wiping her hands on a towel. But no one listens. I mean, I tried bringing it up once. Casey just told me I had an attitude. Did you go to anyone else? I don't even know who I'd go to. That hit him harder than he expected. He had exit interviews. He had surveys. He thought his people had a voice. Turns out, no one was listening closely enough. The next day, he watched from the back as Troy barked at a new teenage hire for leaving a tray too close to the oven edge. "You trying to burn the place down?" Troy snapped, snatching the tray and slamming it onto another rack. The kid, whose name tag read Leo, mumbled an apology and looked down. "Eyes up when I'm talking to you," Troy said. Xavier stepped in. "Hey, he's still learning." Troy glared at him. "Then maybe he should stop acting like an idiot." Xavier's voice dropped. "Don't talk to him like that." Troy looked stunned, but only for a second. "Who the hell do you think you are?" Xavier didn't answer. He looked at Leo. "You good?" Leo nodded quickly, eyes wide. "Go grab Danny. She'll finish this with you." As Leo walked off, Troy turned to Xavier, voice low and angry. "You think because you've mopped a few floors you get to play hero?" Xavier didn't respond. He just stared at him. Troy shook his head and went back to the ovens. That night, Xavier didn't go home. He drove to the central warehouse, met with the inventory manager, and pulled up the past 3 months of supply records for Store 5. The numbers were clear. Consistent weekly deliveries with no signs of undershipment, but in-store usage was off the charts. Flour, sugar, eggs all depleted faster than any other location. He made one call. Asked for the regional manager to meet him first thing in the morning. By 7:30, they stood outside the bakery, both dressed in plain clothes. Xavier watched through the front windows, arms crossed. Inside, Troy was pacing the kitchen, barking orders. Casey sat at the front counter, scrolling on her phone. Danny refilled the coffee urn. Leo wiped tables silently, avoiding everyone's eyes. Xavier gave the nod. They stepped inside together. Casey looked up, confused. "Can I help everyone stop what you're doing?" Xavier said. Troy turned, scowled. "What's this?" "I'm Xavier Owens," he said, pulling off his glasses. "I own this company." Casey's face went pale. Troy's eyes narrowed. "I've been here for the past 4 days, working beside you," Xavier continued. "And what I've seen is unacceptable." No one spoke. He looked at Troy first. "You've been stealing inventory. I have records, I have photos, and I've seen it myself." Troy opened his mouth, but Xavier cut him off. "You've also created a hostile environment for your coworkers. No one deserves to be spoken to the way you spoke to Leo. You're done here. Leave now." Troy stood frozen for a second, then threw his apron on the floor and stormed out. The door slammed behind him. Xavier turned to Casey. "You've ignored theft, discouraged reporting, and failed to manage your team. You've allowed a culture of fear and disrespect to grow under your watch, and you've done nothing to stop it." She blinked, stunned. "I didn't know you did. You just didn't care." He looked at the regional manager. "She's relieved of all duties, effective immediately." Casey opened her mouth again, but Xavier had already turned away. He walked into the kitchen where Danny and Leo stood frozen. "You two come here," he said gently. They stepped forward. "I owe you both an apology. This place should have been better. You've been working hard under pressure and without support. That ends today." Danny looked confused. "What happens now?" Xavier gave her a small nod. "Now we clean house. We bring in a proper manager, someone who listens. We make sure you have everything you need to do your jobs well, and we start earning back the trust of every single customer who walked out disappointed." Leo's eyes widened. "You're really the owner?" Xavier smiled. "Yeah. And I should have been here a lot sooner." He turned to the regional manager. "Get a full audit done. We'll restock everything today. Danny, you're going to help oversee the kitchen until we find a new lead. Extra pay effective now. Leo, you're staying. We'll train you right." He looked around the store. No more hiding, no more silence. This was the beginning of setting things right. 2 days had passed since Xavier revealed his true identity and cleared out the toxic leadership. The store felt different now. Not fixed far from it, but quieter. Lighter. Like a window had been cracked open after months of stale air, but the problems hadn't evaporated. The shelves were still understocked, the prep schedule was scattered, and without a full-time kitchen manager or trained staff leads, Danny was juggling too much. She arrived earlier than anyone, stayed later than she should, and still couldn't keep up with everything. Xavier had told her she'd help oversee the kitchen temporarily. What he hadn't anticipated was how badly the store had been left to rot. There was no reliable system in place. No cross-trained team, no rhythm to the day. Just scattered tasks and exhausted people trying to keep the floor from collapsing beneath them. He showed up that morning at 5:30, wearing his own name badge now, no more disguises. Danny was already at the mixer, her apron powdered with flour. "You didn't have to be here this early," he said, stepping behind the prep counter. She didn't stop mixing. "If I don't start the croissants now, they won't be ready by 9. I've got 3 people from the flagship store coming in to help today. They'll be here by 6. She looked at him for the first time. "Yeah, that's a miracle. They're solid. One of them trained our downtown team last year. I'll have her work with you directly." Danny exhaled just once and went back to beating the dough. By 6:15, the new staff arrived. 2 women and 1 man, all in matching uniforms, sleeves rolled, ready to work. Xavier introduced them quickly. Jasmine, a senior baker with 6 years in the company, Louis, a prep specialist, and Mariah, known for her front-of-house speed and customer handling under pressure. Danny was skeptical at first. Xavier didn't blame her. Trust didn't come easy after months of being ignored. "Just give them a shot," he said quietly. "They're here to help, not take over." She nodded, lips pressed tight. By 7, the kitchen had a pulse again. Jasmine jumped in beside Danny, asking questions without stepping on her lead. Louis reorganized the walk-in fridge, labeling everything by current date. Mariah handled the register solo, giving Leo a chance to shadow and learn the system without panic. Xavier stayed out of their way. He watched. Listened, took notes. At 8:20, a customer knocked over a tray on the front counter. It was an accident, an elbow catching the edge while reaching for a napkin. The muffins scattered across the tile. Mariah bent down to help, smiling. "Don't worry, we've got it." The woman looked mortified. "I'm so sorry, no harm done," Mariah said, already sweeping them into the compost bin. "We'll have fresh ones out in 10. Can I get you a coffee while you wait?" The woman nodded, relieved. Xavier stepped behind the counter once she left. "That was textbook," Mariah shrugged. "People just want to feel like they didn't ruin your day." By 10, the shelves were full. For the first time in weeks, customers stayed. Some even complimented the layout. A few asked if something had changed. Danny and Jasmine moved like they'd worked together for years. They hadn't spoken much, but they didn't have to. Jasmine was deliberate in how she followed Danny's lead without making her feel tested. "Your proofing schedule's solid," Jasmine said while shaping the second batch of croissants. "You did this all yourself," Danny nodded, brushing egg wash on a tray. "Trial and error." "Whatever you did, it's working. These layers are clean." Danny didn't respond immediately, then quietly, "Thanks." At noon, Xavier pulled Danny aside. "You need a break." She looked at him like he'd told her to take a nap on the roof. "I'm serious," he said. "You've been going since 5. Go eat, sit down. 10 minutes. If I stop, I'll fall behind. You won't. Jasmine's got it. Go." She didn't argue again. Just nodded and walked toward the back, shoulders slightly less tense. Xavier turned to Jasmine. "You good covering? Easiest day I've had all week." He smiled, then checked the front. Leo was shadowing Mariah, asking questions now. That was new. "Why do we label the paper bags with the time?" he asked. "Helps us track how long items sit on the shelf," Mariah replied. "If they're out longer than 4 hours, we pull them." He nodded thoughtfully. "No one ever showed me that. Now you know." At 1:30, a customer walked in that Xavier recognized, not personally but from the complaint files. Her name was Nadine. She'd written 3 emails about poor service at this location, once about being ignored, once about stale pastry, and once about being told we're out, without so much as a suggestion for alternatives. This was her first return visit in 2 months. She glanced around, cautious. Mariah greeted her instantly. "Good afternoon. What can I help you with?" Nadine looked at the shelves. "You finally have almond croissants again. Fresh this morning," Mariah said, grabbing tongs. "Want one or two?" Nadine gave a small, surprised smile. "Two." Xavier watched her leave with a small bag and a coffee. No complaints, no tension. Later that afternoon, he met with the regional manager in the back office. The audit had come in. "Troy was pulling enough supplies to bake off-site," she said, sliding a folder across the desk. "We traced it. He was running a booth at the Sunday market in his wife's name." Xavier didn't touch the folder. "We'll press charges." "Already in motion, HR's handling it." "What about the hiring pipeline?" "We've got 2 candidates lined up for store manager. Both internal. Both clean records." "Danny's not ready for the role yet," Xavier said. "But she needs a mentor. Whoever we hire should be able to train without undermining her. I'll make it clear." He stood. "Also no more solo closers, that's done." The regional manager nodded. "Agreed." At 4:30, Danny was finishing her shift. She peeled off her apron slowly, like she wasn't sure what to do with the sudden freedom. Xavier met her by the back door. "You held it down today." She looked tired, but not defeated. "Only because they showed up." "They showed up because the culture you kept alive was worth saving." She hesitated. "I didn't really keep anything alive." "You did," he said. "You kept showing up, that's what mattered." She looked away, then back. "So what now?" "Now we rebuild." "Properly?" He handed her a small envelope. She opened it. Inside was a handwritten note and a temporary pay bump confirmation. "You're not a manager yet," he said. "But this reflects what you've been doing. Until we get your team fully staffed, that number holds." Her voice caught slightly. "You didn't have to, I did. Because no one else did before." She nodded, then walked out into the evening light. Xavier stayed behind, wiping down the counter. The bakery wasn't fixed, not yet. But it was finally facing forward, and this time he wasn't watching from a distance. By the following Monday, the bakery still wasn't operating at full capacity, but it was no longer collapsing. The first signs of stability were taking shape. Croissants were on the shelves by opening. The coffee station was clean. Music played softly over the speakers, and for the first time in weeks, customers were returning with purpose, not just out of convenience. Xavier arrived at 6:30, coffee in one hand, clipboard in the other. He was no longer shadowing. Today, he was walking the floor as the owner, visible, involved, and setting a new tone. The temporary support crew from the flagship location was still in place, but the search for permanent staff had narrowed. He'd interviewed 5 candidates over the weekend. 3 were forgettable. 1 had promise but lacked team leadership experience. The last, a woman named Trina, stood out. She'd been managing a small artisan bakery across town for over 7 years, but left after a corporate buyout shifted priorities. Her references were spotless, and she'd insisted on spending a full shift shadowing before accepting anything. She arrived just after 7, dressed in neutral tones, hair tied back, notebook in hand. Xavier met her at the door. "Still want to see the place at its worst?" he asked. She glanced at the half-filled display behind him. "This isn't the worst. This is recovery." He led her through the kitchen, where Danny was already laying out the laminated dough layers for the second batch. Jasmine had returned for one final training day before heading back to her home store. They moved comfortably around each other, alternating between prep and conversation. Trina didn't interrupt, just observed quietly, occasionally jotting notes. At 9:15, a delivery truck pulled into the side lot. Louis jogged out to meet the driver. When he returned, Xavier noticed 3 items missing from the manifest: vanilla, cocoa powder, and milk. All 3 had been requested on Friday. "Shorted again?" Xavier asked. Louis checked the clipboard. "Looks like it." They marked them as delayed to next cycle. That's the 2nd time in a row for dry goods. Xavier pulled out his phone and called the supply coordinator. "Inventory's been fluctuating across the board," the coordinator said. "We've got new routing software. It's not perfect yet, Xavier didn't raise his voice. Pull store 5 out of the algorithm, manually override, they don't have the margin for error. Understood, I'll fix it today. He hung up and turned back to Lewis. You did everything right, just keep documenting. We'll plug the holes. By 10, Danny was back at the register. Leo stood beside her, watching as she walked through how to enter custom orders. His posture was more relaxed than before, and he asked questions without hesitation. Mariah, still helping temporarily, handled the pickup shelf with quiet efficiency. Trina watched as a customer asked for a custom birthday cake, quote, a request the store hadn't taken in nearly 2 months. Danny hesitated. We're not offering custom orders right now, but we're rebuilding that program. If you leave your info, I can reach out in a few days once we get our schedule back. The customer nodded and filled out the slip. Trina turned to Xavier. She's measured, doesn't overpromise. That's rare. She's carried more than anyone should have had to. She's not burned out, she's close, he admitted, but she's still here. At 11, Trina asked if she could speak with Danny privately. Xavier gave a nod and stepped back. They sat in the break room for 15 minutes. When they returned, Trina handed him her notebook. I'm in, she said, but only if she stays involved. I don't want to undo her progress. She's not going anywhere. Danny looked surprised. You're taking the job. I am, Trina said, but I don't want to be a patch job. I want to build something that lasts. They shook hands. There was no ceremony, no announcement, just a quiet agreement between professionals who both understood the work ahead. By 12:30, the lunch crowd began to roll in. A man in a neon work vest approached the counter and asked for a dozen cookies for a job site. Danny boxed them up quickly. As she handed over the bag, he paused. This place is different lately, he said. Last time I was in, the guy behind the counter couldn't even tell me which cookies had nuts. Told me to guess. Danny raised an eyebrow. We've had some changes. Good changes, he said. Keep it up. At 1, Xavier pulled Leo aside as he wiped down the lobby tables. You've been steady these past few days. Leo shrugged. Things make more sense now. Before, I was just told what not to do. You've got an eye for detail. Ever thought about training as a shift lead? Leo blinked. Seriously, not tomorrow, not next week. But if you want a path up, we can start laying that groundwork. Leo nodded slowly. Yeah. I'd want that. Then let's start with weekend prep. Jasmine wrote out a checklist. You can shadow Mariah and Danny to learn the flow. At 2:30, Xavier stepped into the office to finalize payroll adjustments. As he logged in, he paused at the attendance reports. Over the past 6 weeks, the same pattern had emerged. Under Casey's management, staff had averaged nearly double the missed shifts compared to any other store. Since the reset, no one had called out. Not once. He sent a message to the HR team, rework the leadership evaluation forms. Include anonymous peer feedback and store-level anonymous surveys. What looked fine on paper had failed in practice. That would never happen again. At 4, Trina made a list of equipment repairs needed. The convection oven ran uneven. The refrigerator door didn't seal fully. The sink in the prep room leaked slightly. Xavier reviewed the list and approved everything on the spot. You're not going to price shop, she asked. This team's already been working uphill. No reason to hand them broken tools. At 5, Danny was the last to clock out. She stayed by the door for a moment, watching as Mariah trained Leo on end-of-day reports. You're not staying late, Xavier asked. She shook her head. Trina said I had to leave on time. She was pretty firm about it. She'll be good for the store. She already is. He handed her a paper folder. Inside was a part-time baking course catalog from a local culinary school. I talked to the school director, he said. They offer weekend classes. If you're interested, we'll cover tuition. Full ride. Danny stared at the folder, brows furrowed. Why me? Because you've already proven you can lead. This is just sharpening the tools. She tucked the folder under her arm. I'll think about it. Don't think too long. She smiled a small, real one and left. By 6, the store was closed. Xavier stayed behind to walk the floor one last time. The lights buzzed softly. The scent of baked sugar and yeast still hung in the air. He looked around, clean counters, stocked shelves, quiet calm. It wasn't perfect. It was honest. And for the first time in months, Store 5 wasn't something to fix. It was something to protect.